Hello, everybody. My name is Matthias Haberl from Fair Trade Advocacy Office based in Brussels. I am going with you today through the presentation on small-term grants we had yesterday. And there were some questions of the participants, and I will try to include them in the presentation. So what you get now is basically the classic information we had, plus the, let's say, frequently asked questions which we had at the end of the webinar. And I hope that's useful for you. So let me share my screen with you. So here you see the agenda. Basically, we will briefly go into the hot policy fields we identified for this year. And then we will talk about the grant. So what are the important parts? And then we include the questions of the participants. So that's a bit the red thread for the next couple of minutes. The hot topics we identified for the upcoming period, you can see here on this slide. So on the first thing, we have the Trade and Sustainable Development Action Plan, which is coming up at the European Union, which obviously offers a lot of opportunities in the field of trade and, as it says, sustainable development. That's a very wide topic. The second point you see is the legislative proposal against import deforestation, which is totally connected to many supply chains, global supply chains. We, and maybe also your organizations, are working on. The third point is the proposal on sustainable corporate governance. And last but not least, it's about textile supply chains. So there are quite many windows of opportunities we identified for the upcoming period, but those are not necessarily all topics you can apply for, because for us, it is also very relevant that the topics you apply for are relevant for your context, and yours means your organizational context, your regional context, your national context, your political context. So all of those things you can, of course, have in mind when you apply. And please be so nice to also explain maybe to us why you're applying for a certain topic. That might make sense so that we have a better understanding of why this topic is relevant. Let's go to the call itself. The vision behind the call is that currently we have already around 150 individual young fair trade advocates all over Europe. They are very eager to work on these topics. They also do their own projects, which is not connected to the call we are talking about today. But the overall vision is that these young people, and with young we mean from 18 to 30 years old, and the organizations like yours, that we create some kind of a stronger movement and network that if we see there is a certain need for this topic, can also be sustainable and can also grow and can enrich each other, so that the movement of fair trade and related topics simply grows. That's the idea, the overall vision behind the call we set up. The aim of the call for proposals, you can see, is basically to engage on the one hand youth, and on the other hand policymakers from the EU15+ member states to act in favor of a socially responsible ecological transition. And with this we mean, of course, generally the topic of climate change and trade justice. So we are not only talking about the label of fair trade, but generally about fair labor conditions and the acknowledgement of labor rights in global supply chains. With policymakers, we meant mainly people who also focus on the European level. This can be classically people like the MEPs of your country, but it can also be government officials dealing with EU policies. It can also be regional government officials. So there are different levels, and it's pretty much up to you to decide whom you want to tackle of the policymakers. But there must be a European component in the application. So that's one of the things we want to underline. The timeline. We had the webinar on January 11th. So you see on the left side, it's before the project starts. Then during the project, on the right side, there is also the category after the project. We had the webinar. The deadline for applying is January 21st. Then we will have the jury about the grant pretty soon after. We try to be quick so that we can contact you very quickly afterwards and sign the contracts. One thing that might happen is that we get your applications and then we contact some of the organizations and say, hey, great application, we want to work with you. Please, could you change some of the things you applied for? So that's an option, and then we try to come up with a good solution for both sides. So I think generally for the call and for also our working together, the idea is that we are working pragmatically together so that it makes a lot of sense for you and that we can fund as many good projects as possible. During the project, the first eligible day, also for possible costs, is February 1st. Also, latest in early February, you receive 60% of the agreed grants. So 60% you get before the project, and after the project you get the rest. March 1st, we offer a consultation day. So you are more than invited to join so we can see what are the projects doing, how is it going on, what are your open questions, is there something we can adjust, is there something we can support you with, is there something you just want to share. So all of those things are possible, but it's optional and shall support you in your project. March 15th, that's not optional, that's mandatory. We have a reporting information. The idea behind that is that we give you some ideas how the reporting works so that it's as easy for you and also that you do it already as good as possible so that then the reporting is just very smooth for all sides involved. March 31st is the last eligible day of your project. So that's the timeline. After the project, there is a pretty short time span to hand in the reports, which is a narrative report and a financial report. That's April 7. And after that, please expect potential questions from our sides regarding your reports, because we would like to finish the reporting basically mid-April. And then after the okay for your report, you would get the rest, which is 40% of your project funds transferred. Mid-May, we again optionally invite you to an exchange webinar with the idea to strengthen our organizations and to build capacities, to learn what went well, to share lessons learned, so that we simply transfer the knowledge we gain through the projects for the future. That's the timeline of the whole scenery. There are 2 slides about the budget. So you see, generally, we have a budget for your projects between 2,000 and 12,000 euros, and they will be transferred to your organization's bank account. It will be, as mentioned, 60% at the beginning of the project, 40% after the okay for your reporting. There is no co-financing needed, so basically you can do 100% of an activity or of your project with the funds you receive from our side. There was one question which came up a couple of times, which was, can it be like a side project or an attachment to a bigger project so that you have already a big project, and can these funds be used to support this project? Of course, with special activities are not part of this project, but to say, okay, we do something on the side which supports this project. Of course, you can do that. You're more than invited to do so. Please be aware just to divide these 2 things clearly so that also the reporting for you in both cases works well. Of the budget grants, you can have max 15% for support costs and maximum 15% for indirect costs, and we will go into that into the next slide. The exchange rates, which is probably important for some of your countries, will be from Info-Euro, which is a monthly one, and we provide you with the link, and that will also be part of the contract. The template will be pretty simple, and you see it already on the page where you can also find this webinar. So we try to make it pragmatic again so that it's easy for you to apply and that it's easy for us to understand. And that's exactly the point. Please make it understandable when you apply in all of the points which are there. So describe why you have this idea of the project. If we don't know the context, please be so kind to explain it to us simply so we have an idea why this project is important, how the impact of this project looks like, how it fits into your strategy or your context. So those points are for us pretty important. And it's also about the budget. So you will see the budget template is a very simple spreadsheet. And the idea again is that you can adapt it to your needs and that it's also understandable for us. So that's a bit your job to make it understandable, also for us as funding organization in this case. In case you are applying as a partnership, which is possible. So you can apply with 2 or more organizations, that's totally fine for us. Then the funds will be transferred to the main partner who is also the applying organization. Let's go into these 2 specific points. We have on the one hand the support costs, on the other hand, we have the indirect costs. So support costs are basically equipment or trainings for staff members involved in the project. And the idea is a bit that, so something which is maybe not needed, especially for an activity in the project, but you still need it to do the project. So that's the idea that you have also financial support to do that. And on the other side, you see the indirect costs, which are, well, you can call it the classic indirect costs, basically administrative costs, operational fees such as rent, or if you need accounting or legal expenses, that can also be included in the call, which can be up to 15% of the total budget. Actually, that's pretty straightforward. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact me or us. Regarding the budget, there were some questions also in the webinar. One was, for example, if travel costs can be included. Of course, travel costs are totally eligible costs. The question was if salaries can be included. Yes, salaries in case you are employed in your organization or you want to employ somebody else, you can do so. And these salaries can be 100% used in the grant. And then we have honoraries. So the question was if you pay an external person to do something for you, for example, for a panel discussion, for a training, or I don't know, whatever you need, if those honoraries can also be paid through the grant. And that's also a yes, you can do that. That's then just put a separate budget line where it says the honorary for the speaker or whatever the person does. Is this and this high? And the question was how much can we pay? And that's very different from country to country. But please, let's stay reasonable. Overall, we have 30,000 euros to share. So it's also not super much, but it's an amount. And we also see that a bit as a pilot to see how much is the need and what ideas are there. And then we'll also go back to our funder and see if that makes sense and if we maybe continue with further funds. But for now, that's already a bit for the future. But for now, it's 30,000 euros. Yep, that's about the budget. Reporting. The mandatory reporting webinar takes place on March 15th. There will be narrative and financial report. We provide a template for both of the reports, so you don't have to come up with that. And the report is due to April 7th. And then we will come back to you with potential questions in the week after. So it would be very kind of you to be prepared in this period to answer our questions as soon as possible. And we will definitely underline it again when we make the contract with you. And we will say that probably a couple of times because for us, that is pretty important. Okay, and last but not least, here you see my contact, which you also find on the webpage where you see this webinar. Feel free to always contact me, and also the application, if you apply, goes to my email address, habel@fairtrade-advocacy.org. So this is the presentation, which you should also find on the webpage. I'm stopping now the sharing of my screen, and just to say some other questions which came up during the webinar. There was, for example, the question is COVID. What if I apply for something and then COVID comes in, which we know is at the moment just always a bit of a bummer, what to do. And actually COVID is nothing new. So in the last 1.5 years, in the last nearly 2 years, we have to work with this. So I guess we are all prepared. That's a bit of risk management. So if you apply, tell us how you deal with COVID. That's, I mean, just a bit state of the art already. And the question was also if, because of COVID, you can apply for a project which happens only online. So if it's a project that doesn't have, I don't know, meetings or like discussions in person or whatever. And yes, that's of course possible. You can do that and you can apply for a project that happens only online, but you don't have to. So you can also apply for panel discussions in your cultural center in the city, or I mean, I don't know what, but that's also possible. So both things are possible. Okay, I think those were the main points of the webinar. We hope that's informative for you. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me, and we are looking forward to your application. Thank you for listening to this, and have a nice day. Bye-bye.